Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to part 6 of my Game Boy Zero build. In this video, we're going to be going over how to install the power switch. And I'm going to be using a safe shutdown switch from Campbell over on the Pseudo-Mod Market. I'll leave a link for that down in the description below. Also, we're going to be using this 3D printed component from Wormy on the Pseudo-Mod Market as well. We'll also be installing the PowerBoost 1000C. And lastly, we're going to go over how to disassemble and install a USB hub into the Game Boy Zero. You might notice that this USB hub is already missing one of the USB ports. That's because I removed it for the external USB port, but I will be going over how to do this when we get there. To start out with, we're going to be installing the safe shutdown switch. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is wire it up. On my unit here, I actually managed to mess it up when I was testing it out. The enable hole here actually no longer has the contact ring in it, so I'm going to have to wire directly up to the center prong on top of the switch here. Once you have all your wires soldered in, we're going to go ahead and add some hot glue to the top here to hold the wires in place. Now that we have our switch ready to go, we can move on to the back of the casing. The first thing that we want to do to the casing is take this small 3D printed component and glue it in this upper opening right here. Once the glue has dried, we can then take the switch and glue it in place. As you can see, I've put a small piece of shrink tubing on the top of the switch here. That way, when it goes into the small hole on the bottom of the external switch, it has a much more snug fit. Now to finally install the switch, we're going to put a small dab of hot glue on top of this 3D printed component. Make sure we have the external switch on top of the internal switch, and then set it down on top of the hot glue. Now when the glue is drying, you want to make sure the top of the safe shutdown switch is flat, and you also want to make sure that this hole lines up properly. Now I recommend on this one actually putting another dab of glue on top of the charging port here, just to give it a little more stability. Once all that glue has dried, you can then go ahead and test out your power switch. With the power switch installed, we can then move on to installing the PowerBoost 1000C. We're going to be installing the PowerBoost right on top of this 3D printed component here, but because it is so close to this metal plating, we're actually going to put some electrical tape on top of this. When installing the PowerBoost into the Game Boy, we're going to want this black connector here to be right in this opening that we have in between all these components. To get the PowerBoost to sit exactly where we want in the casing, I'm going to take these two pieces of double-sided adhesive, stick them on the back of the PowerBoost, set the PowerBoost on top of the cables here, and then close the casing, and it should stick to this side of the casing. Now that we know where the PowerBoost needs to sit, we can then take our thumb, stick it along the side here, pull it off, run a bead of hot glue on either side of this, and then put the PowerBoost in place. Once the glue has dried, we are then done installing the PowerBoost into the Game Boy Zero. The first thing that we're going to have to do to the USB hub is disassemble it. Now on this Targus one, it's just snapped together, but yours may be glued together, so just go ahead and rip it apart. Now that we have the internals of the USB port out, we're going to desolder all these USB ports as well as cut off this extra wiring. The easiest way that I found to remove these USB ports from the circuit board is to stick a small screwdriver or pick in between the USB port and the circuit board and put slight pressure on it while heating up the solder points on the back. As you're doing this, the USB port will slowly lift off of the circuit board. As you can see, the left side is slightly raised up from the circuit board, so we're going to do this again on the right side and then continue back and forth until the USB port has come off of the circuit board. And once you've done that enough, the USB port will come right out. So now you just have to do that to the other USB ports on the USB hub. Now that we have the USB hub fully disassembled, we're going to have to wire up 3 of these USB ports. We're going to be wiring up the bottom one, the second one up, and then the top one. This USB hub is going to be going underneath the PCB board on the front of the casing. As you can see, we're going to have to grind off a little bit for it to fit perfectly, but this is where it's going to go. Our top USB port is going to be directly wired over to our Teensy. The center one is for the external USB, which already has the wires attached to it. and the bottom two are going to be for the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi chips. Because the hub is going to be sitting directly on top of our screen, we're going to want to put a piece of electrical tape down right here. Now that we have all the USB outputs wired up, we can go ahead and wire up the input for the USB hub. Once you have all four of those ports soldered in there, go ahead and check and make sure none of your solder points are touching. If you're good to go, then lay a bead of hot glue over all these USB connections. With all the hot glue on there, the last thing that we need to do is grind off a small amount off the top here so it can fit in the casing. With the top of the USB port shaved down, we can then grab the front of the casing and test fit it in place. Now that we know the USB hub fits inside of the Game Boy casing, we're going to cover the back of the USB hub with some electrical tape just to be safe. You can see I've added a little electrical tape to the bottom of this USB hub here because this is actually going to be sitting underneath the PCB and I don't want it to ground out on this ground port here. Once you have the USB hub all taped up, we're going to put a bead of glue on the back of the USB hub and glue it into the casing. You can go ahead and add a little bit more hot glue just to hold it in place. Once that glue has dried, we are then done installing the USB hub into the Game Boy Zero. We now have our power switch, our PowerBoost 1000C, as well as the USB hub all installed into the Game Boy Zero. If you like this video and it helped you out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. In the next video, we're going to be going over how to clean up a lot of this wiring, as well as making a power distribution block out of this prototyping board. If that's something that you might be interested in, be sure to subscribe down below to be notified when that video comes out. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.